Hi, today I want to show you how you can add Google authentication to your web application inside of Nordcraft and Xano. It's super simple. It's so simple you can even add it to an application that already has authentication set up, regardless of if you use Magic Link, OTP, or password authentication. You can simply add this technology that we're going to set up today together to that existing database, or if you do not have an existing authentication database set up, you can take a look at the video that I have in the video description down below, which will show you in less than 4 hours, step by step, how to set up an authentication database, how to set up, your payment endpoints, how to set a whole shell for an SaaS application up. It's completely free. Feel free to check that out. Today we're going to take a look at login with Google. So let's take a look at that. I already have my button designed inside of here in Nordcraft that will allow users to continue with Google. A few things to note is I'm using the type button attribute so that when I click on this here, it's not submitting the form. When I click on this one, it will submit the form. So in order to prevent this button from submitting the form, we're having the type button attribute to it. Now we need to actually get some functionality to it. And for that, we need to create a URL that we can redirect to following Google's principles. Now, their documentation can be a little bit confusing, but it doesn't have to be. It's actually quite simple. You have this base URL that your user navigates to with certain parameters attached to it. I have already wrote most of the important parameters together that we're using in this example. So we need to kind of take those parameters and create a formula in Nordcraft that allows us to kind of generate this programmatically. So for that, I'm going to go back to Nordcraft and we're going to create a new global formula for that so we can use it across multiple pages. This formula is going to be called Google OAuth. I'm going to create this formula, and now I'm in the Nordcraft formula editor. I can now start by concatenating strings together. Concatenating means taking multiple pieces of text and programmatically putting them back together into one piece of text. We start out by adding the concatenate formula inside of here, putting our base URL inside of here, so we will see this is kind of like building the URL. And now we're going to add the client ID inside of here. And we're concatenating by clicking on the plus, meaning we're now putting two pieces of text together into one new piece, building a URL. So now we have the parameter for the client ID. Now we need to get the client ID dynamically inside of this text. The way we do this is by creating an argument. An argument in this formula allows us to add dynamic values into, in this example, static text. We can click on plus to create a new argument, which is like an input. Think of it like a form. And I need to call this client_ID. Now, the example value, just for test purposes, can be client ID in caps. And then I can simply click on the plus inside of here and take the argument with the client ID. And as you can see, it's injecting the client ID dynamically inside of here. So this is kind of allowing us to create this helper function to reuse it across multiple instances with different client IDs if you need to. Now let's go to the redirect URI. Because the way Google Auth works is you are being redirected to a Google domain, and then you will authenticate on there, and then it redirects back to your URL with a code in the URL. And you can take that code and exchange it for user information. So now we're going to add the next parameter inside of here, which is the redirect URI. Now we need to create again an argument for the redirect URI. And I'm just going to set up a sample value for URL. And then I click on the plus again, which will now allow us to click on the plus and get the redirect URI, as you can see, dynamically inside of this URL that we're generating. Now, we probably want to URI encode this so that we don't have any issues in opening that URL when we navigate to it from a button or an A tag. So it's an actual link. That's just something to note. Now, the next step will be adding the response type, which will actually be hard-coded in this example because we're using token-based authentication. Let's click on plus, and let's paste that inside of here. And now, as you can see, we got the response type inside of here. The last one will be the scope. So let's get the scope parameter inside of our concatenating formula. And now we need to create the scope. The scope will be another input argument, not scope. Scope. There you go. And this will just be an empty array. And now I have an array with the scope. The scope needs to be separated by spaces, so we need to do a little bit with the array. So with the scope here, let's add an array. But we actually need to turn this into a formula, because the idea is if the scope size greater than 0, then we want to return the user input scope. If not, we want to return a predefined scope. And I need to manually do this here in Nordcraft. So let's start with email. Let's put the email scope. We're just creating a fallback scope in case the user does not, or you do not define the scope. We'll put the profile inside of here, and we are now taking that user info scope. This is everything we need for basic authentication, but if you want to go beyond that, like connecting with YouTube or something like this, you can definitely take a look at that as well and set those things up. Also, if you want the template here of what I'm doing right now, take a look at the video description. I will put the template of everything right below here, the Xano side, the Nordcraft side, so it's completely available for you to use this for your own project. So let's just, there you go, we got those beautifully set up. Now, we have them as an array, which this is not how we want it. So we need to now add a join filter. A join filter will turn an array into a text, and we can have a separator. The separator will just be a space. So now this is how we need the scope for Google. It needs to be separated by a space. And in this example here, when we get the scope dynamically, meaning the scope input is defined, what we would be doing is we would now take the scope array and we would add exactly like we have done below, the join filter with a space. And then we will get this output and we will URI encode the output so it is safe for the URL to navigate to. And now there we go. Now we built this formula to create this Google authentication workflow. So let's say create Google OAuth 2.0 session link. There you go. That's how simple that is with Google Auth. Now, the next step will be going to the authentication page, going to this button, going on click of the button, and then navigating to that URL by using the go to URL action that Nordcraft provides you. Let's go on FX, and now we're looking under project formulas for our Google OAuth formula. We need the client ID, the redirect URI, and the scope. Now, we will just set that up. We will need to go to Google Cloud Console to create our application. So let's go to Google Cloud Console. There you go. We will go to Google Cloud Console and we will go to APIs and services. Now we can go to OAuth, we can go to credentials, we can create new credentials. I will do OAuth client ID, and now I will select the type web application. We will call this SaaS web app, And now we can skip the JavaScript origins. We won't need that unless we're using some other SDK, which we're not today. But we will need to register our redirect URIs. For this, you want to register your domain, your primary main branch, and your development branch for OAuth. So let's open this here. And what we need to do, which I already did, so let me actually delete this and then we'll do it together, is with Google OAuth, you need to redirect to a specific page. So we need to create a new page before we can register that page. That is called OAuth, just like that. Let's create that page, and we're styling it very simple. Just be 100% width and 100% height, and we'll center it, and we'll give it a white background color. And for now, I'm just going to add an H1 inside of here, calling OAuth 2.0. There you go. So now what we need to do is we need to go to the page settings by clicking on the page name, and we need to add a new path that will be a dynamic path. So we will check the parameter box. This will be called service, and then the default service will be Google for testing. So that way we have this dynamic path which will allow us to run conditional logic based on which auth provider is used. So this could be, for example, Apple for login with Apple, right? So you get the idea. Now we need to take this and register this with Google. So we'll put this right inside of here. We also want to register our non-branch main URL. So I'm just going to remove the branch name from here, which will, if I open this, will open the main application, as you can see, which right now is not an update on the branch. So that way we can test this in our OAuth development branch and in our production application. And then if you have a custom domain, please add your custom domain in here as well. Otherwise it will not work and you will get errors. Let's create this. And now I'm getting my credentials. Let's copy the client ID. That's the first thing that we need. And let's go back to our Google OAuth, to our auth page and to our Google OAuth button. Let's go on the click event here that is on that button, and on the go to URL action, in our formula, we're just going to add our client ID. And now the redirect URI should be dynamic, so it works in the production branch and the test branch. The way to do this is we could use the formula to get the current URL. Then we can use the parse URL formula, which will give us the host name, as you can see. And then we're using the get filter from this to get the host name, which will give us the current name of the URL that we're on, right? And now we are just doing a concatenate to get this into a link, because we need to have it in a link format. So let's make this https:// and then we're going to redirect to our OAuth page, which is that intermediate page that we need for the OAuth process. So we go to OAuth/Google, because right now we're going with Google OAuth. So now that's it. So what's going to happen now is if I click on here, because I'm in Chrome, I will be immediately logged in, and you will see I will have my access token right inside of here. There's actually one error that we did that I need to adjust in that formula. We have the response type token. It actually needs to be code. That is a simpler way to work with it. So now we should be all fine. Let's go on continue with Google, and you will see we now get this code. And we can exchange this code for user information, so we can authenticate the user. So what Google is doing is it redirects to Google server, and then Google redirects to our page, right now, this one, this intermediate page, which has a code. So this page now needs to take the code, and then it needs to redirect this to, it needs to take that code, issue a cookie from the backend, take that cookie, set it, go to the login page. And from here, we now treat it like a password, essentially. So now comes the server side setup for this. That will be fun. So let's get the token from this URL by just doing a little simple principle here. Let's go back to the OAuth page, and we are registering a query parameter, query of code, right? And then I can just put a sample code in here, 1, 2, 3, for example. So now when we reload this page here, and we could go inside of here, and we can just add, for example, a text area. And this text area could be bound to the code query parameter. So now when we reload the page, we will see the code inside of here. Little debugging tip, right? So now it will make that process way simpler for us. So now with that code, we need to take a look at the Google OAuth identity documentation for server-side web apps, because now we will process this on the server. And this will allow us, we need to use this URL to exchange the code for an access token. So for this, what we need to do is we will need to go inside of our API, and we can do this with an existing database. That's the beautiful thing. We just already need to have an authentication database. And we're going to create a function to exchange that Google code. So I'm just going to call this SAS_Google_OAuth/exchange. So we're exchanging that code for an authentication token. And then we will issue a Xano authentication token. So let's say exchange code for auth for Google access token, right? That's not a Xano access token, a Google access token. YouTube, inherit settings. We'll save this. And now this needs a few parameters set up, but let's first add the curl inside of here. So we will make an external API request, and now we will build that API together. So let's go inside of here. And in this example, we're taking the base URL for that endpoint. And we are going to go back to Xano, and we'll be pasting that inside of here. And now we're going to add the client ID. So we're going to add parameters. We're going to set a new parameter of client ID. We'll just leave them empty for now. And now we're setting a new parameter of client secret. We're putting the client secret inside of here. And then we're going to apply this. And then we're going to add a new set filter, which will be, oh, where did documentation go? We'll be adding the code. So let's go back inside of here and we'll be adding the code. Let's apply that. Let's set that. And let's go back inside of here. Now we take the grant type. That could be, authentication authorization code. Now we're going to go back, put this inside of here. Now this is a hard-coded value, so we can already fill that one out with the information that Google gives us. So we take the authorization code and we can paste that inside of here and just save that. Now the next step will be adding the final one, the redirect URI, because we need to validate that again. That's actually why I wanted to make that redirect URI dynamic. But let's take a look at this. Let's add a new set filter to this. We'll be pasting this inside of here, redirect URI. And now we're going and we will leave that out for now. So there are a few values that we need to do dynamically. That's the code and the redirect URI. The rest will come from environment variables, so it's protected and secure in Xano. We will save this now. So now we will add our inputs. We will add a text input that's required. That will be the code. We will add that input, and now we can add another input. That will be the redirect URI. That's a text value as well. So we do redirect _ URI. So we got the redirect URI. That will be also required. Let's add that input here. Now we can just fill out those values for now manually. So I can go and get my code for testing purposes. We'll put the code inside of here. And then the redirect URI would be this Google OAuth page. That would be the host of this page, actually. So we will go back to Xano, and we will just put this right inside of here. Take a look at that. Beautiful. So now we can just map those values. Oh, what just happened? There you go. Now we can map those values here with the code, and we will take that input of code, and now we will go with the redirect URI, and we'll map that with the input of the redirect URI. There you go. And now the client ID and the client secret, they will be dynamically from the environment variables to make them secure and protected. So let's duplicate this right here. Take a little bit. And now we're going to go to settings. We're going to go on manage here. And now I'm going to save my client ID as an environment variable. Go back to settings. That is the one that is not protected or needs to be protected, but we store it in here for convenience because it's already on the front end. Let's do SAS _ Google _ client _ ID. We'll paste that inside of here and we will save that. Now we will add another variable that's SAS _ Google _ client _ secret. Now that's a secret that should be protected. That's important. You don't want other people to have that. So let's copy the client secret. Let's go back to Xano, SAS Google client secret. Let's paste that and save that. And now we're done. So now we can go back to our API here, go back inside of here, go to our client ID. We can go to environment and we will take our client ID. Now we go to the next step to take the client secret and we will get the client secret. Just like that. Super simple. And there's no authentication header actually needed, but I'm just going to call the response Google _ access _ token _ API. We will save this and we will update the preferences. So now when I run this API, as you can see, we're actually getting an error. Ooh, why is that? Let's take a look. Let's double check this. We are doing a GET request. I think it will be a POST request. That could be. It will probably be a POST request. Let's try this again. And yeah, there you go. We get the ID token. We will get the access token. We're getting everything officially from, from Google. So this will now give us the access token. And this access token is actually pretty important because this will allow us to read some of the information. Now, the ID token itself will actually have some of the information. So I'm just actually going to return the whole payload. If you're working with accessing people's YouTube channel, for example, if that's your use case for adding Google Auth, you want to take that token and work with that. If you just want to validate their email, the ID token will probably be enough. Because if we take a look at the ID token here, and we're going back to JWTIO, we can decode this JWT token, which will give me the information of the Google account, right? So it will give me the email and if the email is verified or not and all that kind of stuff. So in this example, I'm actually just going to take the result from this API, but I'm going to put the base information decoded inside of here. So we have an easier way to access that. So we don't need to do another API, but you could, right? You do get that access token and you can, call certain APIs with that. But we just need it for auth, for login, so we can take a simpler route here because we have that specific scope and it comes directly from Google. So we can trust that source. So I'm going to create a variable and that variable will be response. And then I'm going to just take API Google access token, response, result, this one that inspires me, that interests me, right? And then I'm adding a set filter of user _ info. And with this one, I'm just going to decode this. So I can take the user info. The user info will be the ID token decoded. And there is actually a simple way how we can decode that ID token. we will need to take the middle part. If I take that token again, it's split it by, and if I go to JWT.io, it is split into 3 pieces. So if I paste that inside of here, you'll see we have the header, the payload, signature. We are interested in the payload. This will give us the user information. So we can go back to Xano and we just take the ID token here. So we're going to response, result, ID token. I'm adding a filter of split. I'm splitting it by the period. So now it's split. It will be split if I were to, inspect elements. Inspect. Okay, that was, keep editing. Okay, let's save this. Okay, so now let's just return the response in this example. And we can't run it again, unfortunately, because that token is now expired. So we need to go through the login process again. So let's try this again. Continue with Google, copy that code, and then we can go back here and we can paste this inside of here. Let's run this. Ooh, what's going on here? Let's double check that. I think I may have copied the wrong part or pasted that. Let's double check. Okay. Oh, I did it as a redirect URI. Of course, that will not work. Let's put the code inside of here. There you go. And now I need the redirect URI, right? It should match. There you go. And let's take that URL that we're redirecting to. Okay. And now we can get this beautifully right inside of here. We can run this. Look at that. And now you see they're split into an array. We need to take the second item, meaning in an array, this is 0, 1, 2. So we're adding a get filter to get the first one. And then it starts with EY. This tells us base 64 encoded, right? So if we go to response, in here, we can now add a filter of get, and we're getting 1. This will get the first one. So now I will need to clear the token again. That is sometimes a little bit of a boring process working with OAuth, always just going back and refreshing things, but it's fun. Okay, now we get a new token, and we can go back to Xano, paste this inside of here, run this again, and there you go. Now we get the user info. That's it. Now we need to decode it. EY means base 64. So we are going to go to this user info. We're adding a filter of base 64 decode. We'll apply this and we'll save this. Now we need to get a new code again. So we're going to go back, one page back, continue with Google. We're getting the new code, and now we're going to put it right inside of here. That's how simple that is. Let's run this again. And now, as you can see, we're getting the payload. Now we need to turn this into JSON, right? So we need to JSON parse it. So we can go inside of here and we can add, go to this payload, and we're now adding a filter of JSON decode, because it is encoded, right? So now it will be parsed. So now we will need to go to the code once more, and we will just go in here one step back. We will click on continue with Google. There you go. We can now copy that code, and we can now go back inside of here, put the code right inside of here, run it, and we will now get that payload in JSON, right? So we get, you know, all those kinds of information. We get the email, we get the name, we get a picture even, right? Given name, all that kind of stuff. So now with that payload, we can then have the user authenticate properly because we have that email. So this will be the response. If you're building a Google integration with YouTube, Calendar, whatever, you need this token. You don't need this token right now, so you're fine on that. And the ID token will also be helpful. And we have with user info now the decoded information, which will give us the email, and that's everything we need. So now we can publish this, and that is essentially it. Beautiful. So now, with this function in place, we can set up the API to handle the continue and issue the authentication token, right? And that's actually pretty simple. What you want to do is you want to go to your existing, oh, wrong one. I got too many things in here. Okay, SaaS project. You want to go to your existing API endpoint that handles authentication, login, or all that, and either clone it or rebuild it from scratch right now. For the sake of, convenience, because I'm doing quite a lot of logic, and you can take a look how I structured that in the video description down below, I'm going to take my existing auth verify endpoint, which will issue the token, and I'm going to clone that endpoint. I will continue, and I will repurpose this to be OAuth/Google/continue. OAuth/Google/continue. I will clone that endpoint, and now we will go to that endpoint, which will need to be turned actually into a get endpoint, so we can run it faster. Let's save that, and we will now need to adjust this endpoint to receive new values. So the email value will need to be replaced, and the code will need to be removed. And I'll be adding a new code input. This will be the code for our function. And then we need the redirect URI, and that will also be required. We can actually, because it's the same payload, just take this, paste it inside of here, and we would just need to replace it because actually, there you go, because we will need to have a new code to run this one time. So you know the drill. We go back, continue with Google, and now we're getting that code right inside of here beautifully, and we can put this right inside of here. There you go. So now what we're going to do is we are going to adjust this a little bit, and we're going to add our SaaS Google Auth Exchange formula inside of here. And it already is mapped with the code input and the redirect URI. So in case it is not on your side, just manually do this now. And then we will call this output Google user account data. We will save that. We'll move it up here. And now, actually, let's rename this. I forgot. I wanted to make an underscore. That does not look nice. Beautiful now. Look at that. Okay, now we can keep going. Okay, beautiful. So now we can go on stop and debug, so we can run it and see if it correctly works in this example. So I'm going to take that data, and now we can run this one time, and this will give us the user information. So now we need to go and get the record from users based on their email. So I have my existing logic here. So I'm just taking the email now that comes from the Google account, from user info, where I'm getting the email. I can save this, and now I will be getting the user record, and the logic will need to be adjusted a little bit. Now in this example, I do not need to have that precondition to validate any password, so I can delete that in here, but the precondition will need to be in effect if the email is available, if there's data coming back. So I can do the precondition. This access code is expired or invalid. That's a good one. So the precondition will be if user record, no, not user record. If we lost that data, so it will be userinfo.email, right? So we will need to do the condition Google user account data dot user info dot email does not equal null. Does not equal null. There you go. And then we got that precondition, so we are only issuing an auth token if that response from Google was valid. So if I'm running this again, we will see this will throw an error, actually even on the custom function level, because we can't find that token to return it. Now, this is probably not the most secure way to handle things, and we can actually get rid of this precondition by moving that authentication process and that error handling inside of the function. So let's go to the function and let's add a stop and debug while we are running this function with an error. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to run this, we're going to run this with an error. So we get the payload and all that. So now we can take a look if the response is bad request 400. We can now add a precondition to stop this. So the precondition will need to be that the access token response status will need to equal 200 in order to be successful. If that is not successful, we can say this access token is invalid. I would just do access denied, and I would not have Google's response in there, just for that reason, unless you want it for debugging. So we'll save this. And now when we delete that stop and debug and run this again, we will get that error response. Now when we publish this function, if it means 200 in an API, means it is successful. So, and we should also fix the typos in case, this access token is invalid. We will save that. We will publish this again, and we're good to go. Beautiful. So now when we go back to that, back to our API, we now actually have that precondition inside of that function. So when I run this with the wrong access token, you'll see how it doesn't issue the authentication token for the Xano database. So we don't have Google manage the authentication tokens. We're still managing them ourselves using Xano. We're just using Google to understand if that user is authenticated. So we're essentially replacing our OTP system via email with Google's database and trusting that Google gives us correct information because the user has the Google cookie already in their browser and all that, which is a rather secure way of implementing this, and it is also pretty simple to do so. With the edit record inside of here, we don't necessarily need that, but I did make a big mistake, and we need to correct it. Because what I did is, I'm using OTP in this example, and I'm actually creating a Polar customer ID for this user. I used the wrong endpoint for this. Now the beautiful thing is we need to delete this, but the great thing about it is we can do it all over again because practice makes perfect. Because this auth/code endpoint is more crucial because it actually creates the Polar customer if the user exists or not. So we want to have that logic set up. So it essentially replaces the email process doing this with Google and just validates it immediately. So it is technically a hybrid in this example. And with that being said, we should actually just start it from scratch. To be honest, I think that would be a better example. So excuse me for that little exploratory time. Let's just create a new endpoint OAuth/Google/continue. OAuth/Google/continue. We will do get, and the description will be exchange Google auth code with access token. The tag will be YouTube, so I know that this is for the YouTube video, and we will save this now. There you go. So now I can add my input inside of here, and that will be our code, which will be required. And then we can add our redirect URI. Redirect URI, which will also be required. We can add that input, and now we're going to add our Google auth get user info. Google, no, that's not the right one. I did a wrong one. I got too many. That was SaaS Google Auth Exchange. And it's already linked, so that's great. And the response, let's just do user underscore details. We will save this and update preferences. Now we can add a stop and debug here, and we can return the user details. When we run this now, we need to do the authentication process one more time. We get that code, and we can put the code into Xano. And then we need to get that redirect URI, so we can validate the authenticity. You will need to provide that to your backend to validate that information. And now when we run this, we're getting the user details. So we will take that email. So let's just create a variable for now of user email, user underscore email. And then we're going to take the user info, and we will take the user info email. There you go. So now when we do a stop and debug here with the user email, and we were to run it again, we will get an error because we need to have a new fresh token. So we could just really quick add a new token inside of here. OAuth is fun. You always got to go back between front end and back end and test things out all the time. But I think adding that will definitely increase your conversion, so it's definitely worth it implementing it. Let's run this again, and we got that email. There you go. So now I can look for has record if we have that user already in our database. I will go to SaaS users. I will look that up based on the email column in our database. Email. I will take a look if that user email is already in there. I will call this user underscore exists. I will save this, and then I will say yes. I want to add a conditional under here. There you go. So now we need to add or edit that user. So user exists equals true. Here's the thing. If the user exists true, we just need to get the user record. So we're doing a get record, and we're going to go right inside of here for SaaS users based on email. And I'm going to do based on the user email variable. And I'm going to call that user underscore record. There you go. And now if the user exists is true, then, but if the user exists is not true, what we need to do is we will need to add a new record to our database and create that user, and we will need to put that user email inside of here, and they will start out on the free plan. There won't be a login code because they're not using right now our OTP auth principle, and the polder ID needs to be empty for now too. So now we can save this, and I will return this as user record. Okay, now because we are SaaS, we're charging for stuff, we need to run our Polar customer function. So Polar create customer. And we will need to put their email from user email inside of here. The external ID will be their user record ID. That's the ID that the user will have in our database column. Metadata can just be user ID. So I'm going user underscore ID just as a backup, right? And I can take user details, user info. No, my bad, not Google. I will take the one from our user record database from here, and I will take that user record ID. And then sandbox will be true because we're in test mode, right? So now we're actually generating this Polar customer information. So I'm returning this as Polar underscore customer, and we will save this. And now I can have a stop and debug under my Polar customer. So or this could be a Stripe customer, whatever, right? And now I will need to have a free authentication code. Let's just redo this, and we will need to go one time to the database actually to delete it. But let's take that code. Now I can put the code right inside of here, and I can run it. And now I'm getting a customer email address already exists. That's great. Need to go with a different Google account now. Or I need to go to Polar and get rid of that. Okay, that's fun. But I know it will just return the ID to me. So let's just assume it works. Let's go to my other endpoint when I do the Polar customer, and I will just take a look at what the customer ID will be. So that's response.id. I will just assume that it would work, right? So we go inside of here, and then of course you want to implement logic that will get the ID if the user is already in your project. You know, that those are all extras that you can add yourself, you know, based on kind of like how in detail you want to go with that, right? You can, and that's actually pretty simple. That's just kind of like looking at Polar's customer response. If it's empty or has that specific error message, call their API to get the customer, so you can kind of like tune that together, right? So that's pretty simple. But in this example, when I get that customer ID, I assume it would work. I will go now with edit record in SaaS users. And then I will look this up by the user ID from the user record above here that was created. And I will take that ID, so I can edit that one. And we will just add the Polar customer ID with the ID of the Polar customer. Okay, and then this will be also called again, user_record. And we will save this. So now we're creating that customer in Polar in our billing system, if they already exist. And that's, you know, kind of like a little cool thing. So now we will, at the end, issue our authentication token. We will create an auth token, and I want this to be issued for 30 days, so I will do this times 30. And I will set that as the appropriate number. Let's go back to Xano and put this inside of here. The ID will need to be the user record ID. There you go. And the auth token will be auth_token. There you go. And then the database table will need to be SaaS_users, or whatever is your database table. We can now save this, and now we're just returning the auth token to our front end. We will save this and publish this. And now we're good to go. This will now validate this beautifully for us. And then we can set that cookie and work with it nicely. So with that being said, let's create a new token by going back and going through the authentication process again. This will give us the token so we can copy it. We can now go to our service, to our code, put a sample code inside of here. And now we can create an API that is already linked with our Xano account. If you don't know how to do that, watch the video that we have in the video description down below. It's free. It's a full 4-hour course helping you get that set up, free on YouTube, available. There you go. OAuth Google/continue. Beautiful. And now we will need to add some parameters, code and redirect URI. The code will come from, very simple, the code parameter. There you go. The redirect URI, very simple, will come from current URL. That'll be a wrong one. And we will need to do get host name. We first need to do parse URL, get host name, concatenate. We will need to add https://, and then we will need to build that URL for Google Auth. So that will be /OAuth/Google. That's the page that we're on right now. And now this actually should be successful. I mean, we probably called it too many times. So https://OAuth/Google. Let's double check. That should be correct, right? Let's do OAuth/Google. Yes, there you go. It could be an editor thing because it says toddle.dev here, but https:// seems to be fine. Okay, And then what we will be doing, we will make this a little bit different. I will remove auto fetch, or we can do auto fetch on this one actually. And we can then take a look if we can get this response in the OAuth continue, if we can get that data into encode JSON. Okay, let's try opening this page. This will have the authentication failed, of course, because there's no code. But let's try doing the auth process here. Let's do continue with Google. And you will see the data will now have our authentication token because we're exchanging the auth token with our Xano auth token. So in this example, what we can simply do is we can just go to our API here, and then we can do this event, and we know it will be just the payload because that's everything we will return that will have the auth token, as you can see right inside of here. That's just the data. So we can go on event, and then on success, we can set session cookies. We can put the access token inside of here. That's the login token. We will take that continue API. We will take the data, and then we'll have the cookie. Now I need to set the expiration of the cookie. That's 30 days. We'll put that inside of here. And then on success, we are going to the URL. That will be /. That's our logged in page. So if everything in here is successful, and let's just delete this, and let's just add a CSS loader inside of here. My loader. There you go. We should now be able to successfully log in with Google into our application. So I can go to continue with Google, and I'm logged in into my application with my Google account. Look at that. Isn't that cool? So I'm now logged in and authenticated. And if I take a look at the database, that user is in our database. There you go. That is the user right here. There you go. Of course, I'm already on my folder because I've been testing it before of the video. And you know, that's something you want to note is you want to kind of like have your poller function return if the user already exists, that appropriate account. But that's all you need to do. And if you want the template for this video, it's in the description down below. And if you need a little bit more help or want some personal assistance in building your application, if you got any questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below. And if you want some help if you're unstuck to help you move faster with your application, take a look at NoCodeProCode.com. It may be something that could interest you. That's our community where we have daily office hours to help you solve your hardest problems when it comes to NoCode and Nordcraft and Xano. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It was a blessing doing this together with you. Have a great rest of your day and see you in the next video. I really appreciate all your support. Thank you so much.